Tonight on Primetime, tensions between the United States and Iran are intensifying, with sharply contrasting expectations over how long this conflict could last. Donald Trump says the war could be over within 2 to 3 weeks, while officials in Tehran insist they are prepared for at least 6 months of sustained confrontation. Uncertainty remains high, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. What explains the stark difference between Washington's and Tehran's timelines for how long this conflict could last? Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Primetime. Our top story tonight: U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested that operations could wrap up within weeks, signaling it may be nearing the end of its military campaign in Iran. Meantime, tensions remain high across the region. Let's see the story.
The U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington could end its military campaign in Iran within 2 or 3 weeks, adding that U.S. forces would be leaving very soon as he signaled operations are nearing completion.
I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3. We're hitting them very hard. Last night we knocked out tremendous amounts of missile-making facilities. As you probably read or wrote, we knocked out. Excuse me?
Pardon me for interrupting. The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in 2 or 3 weeks?
I think with 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
At the same time, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said the country has the necessary will to end the conflict, but only if guarantees are put in place to prevent further escalation, underscoring persistent gaps between the two sides. Tensions remain high across the region, with Iran's Revolutionary Guards warning they will target U.S. companies, while continued attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz disrupt global energy supplies. Meanwhile, Israel says it is strengthening regional alliances to counter what it describes as the Iranian threat, as strikes and retaliatory attacks continue across multiple fronts, including Lebanon and Iraq. Despite signs of possible diplomacy, the situation remains volatile, with both sides signaling readiness to escalate even as they speak of ending the war.
The upcoming days will be decisive. Iran knows that, and there's almost nothing they can militarily do about it. Yes, they will still shoot some missiles, but we will shoot them down. Of note, the last 24 hours saw the lowest number of enemy missiles and drones fired by Iran.
Meanwhile, the United States is increasing its military presence, with a third aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, joining 2 others already in the region. Against that backdrop, there is still no clear timeline for a ceasefire, with developments on the ground and ongoing diplomatic efforts expected to shape the next phase of the conflict.
All eyes are now on Washington as President Donald Trump is set to address the nation later today, an announcement that could signal the next phase of this rapidly evolving crisis. To unpack the military outlook, geopolitical risks and market implications, I'm joined by Diogo Castro Silva, a political analyst joining us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Mr. Silva, welcome to the program.
Hi there.
So, Mr. Silva, we are seeing very different timelines. What is your realistic expectation for how long this war could last?
Well, I believe we are still, unfortunately, in the escalation phase. Mm-hmm. Let me take 2 steps back. First of all, we have to understand that this war was initiated because there was a perception on the part of Israel and the US that the regime could be decapitated and a quick regime change could be achieved. There was no planning for anything beyond that. When that plan failed, now the US and Israel are trying to reassess the situation, and there has been this fluid situation of objectives. What are the objectives? The war could end tomorrow because the attack could stop tomorrow. The problem is, what is the end state you will achieve tomorrow? If the end state you will achieve tomorrow is the Strait of Hormuz under full Iranian control, with potential tolling and threats to the GCC states and so forth, then you have a problem with the end state. So I think the question of the how long does it take, it depends on what objectives you want to achieve. And what the Trump administration has been having a very hard time is really to explain what are the objectives and what is the strategy to attain them. And this continues to be unclear now as it was since the beginning. And having 2 or 3 weeks or 1 month or 1 day doesn't change that much on the situation.
Iran says that it's ready for at least 6 months of war. Why might Iran be preparing for a much longer conflict than the United States anticipates?
In any conflict, there are two parties. And the conflict only, so for you to end the conflict, the two parties need to agree to end the conflict. And the loser, if you want to call it that way, has also a veto power on the end, has to admit he lost, or has also to want to win the war. For Iran, they clearly want to take advantage of this war to readdress their strategic position. And in their view, prolonging the conflict, prolonging the economic pain and the political pain is working on their advantage. So time is working on their advantage, and thus they don't seem to be in a hurry to close the deal, to close the conflict. It's like when Taliban in Afghanistan used to say, "You have the clocks, but we have the time," and Iranian, in their view, they have the time.
Mr. Silva, how credible is Donald Trump's timeline from military standpoint?
I think the timeline is critical on a couple of dimensions. One is even on the military part, because maintaining such a force for such a long time, I believe the USS carrier Gerald Ford has been deployed for 12 months already. So it's getting well beyond what is a normal, even an emergency deployment. So you are having a lot of stress and on supplies of interceptors, for example, on your military infrastructure on the ground. So you have that constraint. The other constraint is political. Not only in the internal political dimension in the US, because the political costs, as more the campaign continues, will start to pile up, because we will not, for example, recover a normal situation. Even if the conflict ends today, you will not have a normal supply situation of oil and other critical ingredients for a long time. This is a bit like the COVID situation. So those political costs will pile up in the US, and with the midterms looming, that also represents a question of a hard constraint. And the third is also related to the allies of the US in the region, namely, but not only in Asia and elsewhere. This is having a critical impact on these regions. So you have those three-time constraints working against the US and Israel at this stage.
Mr. Silva, in your view, how critical is the control of the Strait of Hormuz in shaping the duration and outcome of the war?
Oh, it's critical, because don't forget, we had the Strait of Hormuz open before this war happened. And now we gave a taste of Iran how to control it. And the Strait of Hormuz is one of these choke points. Everybody talks about choke points, but
Yes.
is one of those critical choke points, not only for oil, but for example, for materials like for ingredients like fertilizer or helium, which is critical for the production of chips. So it's really critical. And if we gave the Iran a taste of how to control the strait, how even to collect money out of controlling the strait, you can have very deep consequences, not only in different supply chains, but even in the dominance of the US dollar in the supply of these critical materials, because Iran, as news have circulated, has been using the yuan, the Chinese yuan, as a mechanism to circumvent US restrictions on its money flows and on its tolling charges in the strait. So you really are opening a big box of Pandora that can have many different consequences downstream, besides those evident ones, which is about controlling a critical sea lane.
After Trump's remarks, markets initially reacted positively. Are investors underestimating the risks here?
I think you have been seeing a lot of announcements done also almost in a way to influence the markets in the short term. The greatest danger with that, if this kind of announcements are not fall through, is that is that you risk losing all credibility, and then you can have a really a breach of trust with the markets. Second, I can give you a quick example. We are talking about ending the war in 2-3 weeks. Very well. Why is additional forces being sent to the region, including ground troops? Because if the use of ground troops is to be credible or is to be used, definitely the war is not going to end in 2 or 3 weeks. So also the speech is not being related to what is happening on the ground. So the markets, in a way, might rally in the short term, but if you breach their trust, then you have a much bigger problem down the line.
You've talked about ground operations. If the United States launches the ground operations, do you think that it will achieve its goal?
I think it's very hard unless you are prepared to do a long-term deployment in a much bigger fashion. Because remember, U.S. went to Iraq with around 150,000 troops, and that was enough in the short term, but then it had a lot of consequences, and the U.S. stayed in Iraq in an active way for more than 10 years. So is the public prepared for such a kind of deployment? I don't think so. And if you are not prepared to do that kind of deployment, I believe it's very hard to achieve any meaningful objective, because what you are doing is really expose yourself to more attacks, and now with the potential of much higher casualties. So we are really in a situation similar in a way to the Suez crisis of the 1950s, or even to the realistic military objectives of the Dardanelles campaign in 1916. So what I mean from this is that your military capabilities are not working with your objectives, because first of all, it's very hard still to get what are clear objectives from this administration, and then from there to discuss what are the objectives. And the ground troops only accentuate that separation.
Mr. Silva, what signals should we watch for in President Trump's upcoming address?
I mean, we have obviously to look at what, if, first of all, some objectives are clearly stated in this address. And this is that can be an off-ramp for a future exit from the theater. If that is not spelled out in a very clear way, and if the objectives continue to be mixed up or being kind of realistic, then I believe we are in the process of continuing escalation. If President Trump makes a very limited set of objectives, that might mean that there is a chance of a winding down of the operation. So I would look primarily to how, if any, of these objectives of this war are spelled out. That would be the indicator I would be looking at.
Diogo Castro Silva, thank you very much for talking to A News. We truly appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
After the break, we'll look at the major stories from around the world. Stay with us.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Britain is looking to strengthen ties with Europe as Prime Minister Keir Starmer responds to rising global tensions and criticism from Washington. Keir Starmer says the Iran conflict could define Britain for a generation, warning of economic pressure similar to the 1970s energy shocks. He called for closer cooperation with Europe and confirmed plans to host 35 countries to explore ways to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. His comments come after renewed criticism from U.S. President Donald Trump as relations between the two leaders continue to deteriorate.
And today I can announce that later this week, the Foreign Secretary will host a meeting that brings those nations together for the first time, where we will assess all viable diplomatic and political measures that we can take to restore freedom of navigation, guarantee the safety of trapped ships and seafarers, and resume the movement of vital commodities.
Tensions in the Middle East are rising again as recent strikes around Beirut have led to increasing casualties and signaled a further deterioration in the situation. According to reports, the attacks mainly targeted vehicles in the southern outskirts of the capital and nearby areas. The Israeli military said it carried out 2 separate strikes in the Beirut area.
On Wednesday, 2 Israeli strikes hit areas around Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry said at least 7 people were killed and 24 injured. The attacks targeted vehicles in the southern outskirts of the capital and nearby areas. They are part of Israel's escalating operations in Lebanon. Officials say at least 1,200 people have been killed and 1.2 million displaced so far. The conflict intensified after Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel. This came 2 days after Iran was struck by Israel and the United States. Israel then launched new ground and air operations. The Israeli military said it carried out 2 strikes in the Beirut area. The targets were a senior Hezbollah commander and another member of the group. It did not confirm whether they were killed. Lebanon's state news agency NNA reported that 1 strike hit a car in Calda. 2 people were killed and 3 injured. The second strike hit vehicles in Jaina. 5 people were killed and 21 injured. Hezbollah has not yet commented on the strikes.
The United States is in talks with Denmark to expand its military access in Greenland, including 3 additional sites on the Arctic island. The proposed locations are former American bases with existing infrastructure such as airfields and port access. If approved, the expansion would mark the first significant increase in U.S. military footprint there in decades. Washington is relying on a long-standing defense agreement that allows a broad access, with officials saying discussions so far have been cooperative. Ukraine says it's ready to pause attacks on Russian energy targets if Moscow does the same, hinting at openness to an Easter truce. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kiev could reciprocate as both sides face pressure from rising global energy prices and ongoing strikes. But the Kremlin has reacted cautiously. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow had not seen a clear proposal from Kiev and stressed that Russia is focused on achieving a broader peace agreement rather than a temporary ceasefire. The exchange underlines how far apart the two sides remain. Japan and France are stepping up coordination over the conflict involving Iran, focusing on energy security and shipping routes. The two leaders met in Tokyo and agreed to work closely on reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
Japan and France have agreed to strengthen coordination to help end the conflict involving Iran and restore shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The agreement was reached during talks in Tokyo between Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and President Emmanuel Macron. Japan, which relies on the Middle East for around 90% of its oil imports, has already begun using its strategic reserves to ease pressure on its economy.
Regarding the situation in the Middle East, including developments in Iran, we confirmed the importance of ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, maintaining stable supply of critical goods, and the early de-escalation of tensions. We agreed to continue close communication on these issues. Later, over dinner, we will engage in deeper discussions, including perspectives on energy security.
France says it is working with multiple countries on proposals for a future mission to secure the strait once fighting subsides. Japan has indicated it may consider sending minesweepers, although any deployment would be limited by its pacifist constitution. Beyond the Middle East, both countries also agreed to deepen cooperation in the Indo-Pacific and signed deals covering critical minerals, civilian nuclear technology, and artificial intelligence.
During this visit, a roadmap for critical minerals and materials was signed, which will allow us to strengthen our partnership and diversify our capacity to partner with other countries and source our resources. Through innovation, we are also adopting common techniques for separating these rare earth elements.
The two leaders also confirmed they will maintain regular coordination on energy security and supply chains, following the agreements signed during the visit.
Major tech companies are cutting jobs as they redirect billions into artificial intelligence, with firms such as Oracle and Meta announcing layoffs as part of wider cost-saving and efficiency efforts.
Oracle is laying off thousands of employees, including 491 roles in Washington state from June 1st, according to a regulatory filing. The company says the cuts are part of a reduction in force and other terminations. In a March filing, Oracle said it expects costs tied to its fiscal 2026 restructuring plan to reach up to $2.1 billion, largely driven by severance and related expenses. Oracle is increasing spending on AI infrastructure as it competes with major cloud providers. More than 70 tech companies have cut around 40,480 jobs so far this year, according to industry data. At Meta, several hundred employees were laid off in late March across teams including Reality Labs, social media, and recruiting. The company is planning sweeping layoffs that could affect 20% or more of its workforce, which stood at nearly 79,000 employees at the end of last year. Meta has forecast total expenses of $162 billion to $169 billion in 2026, alongside rising employee compensation as it invests heavily in artificial intelligence. CEO Mark Zuckerberg has said some projects that previously required large teams can now be handled by a single person, pointing to efficiency gains from AI.
Kenya's tea sector is coming under strain as shipping disruptions linked to the Iran conflict leave millions of kilograms stuck at port, raising losses and putting pressure on farmers' incomes.
Kenya's tea exports are under pressure as shipping disruptions linked to the Iran conflict leave large volumes stranded at port. Around 8 million kilograms of tea have been stuck in warehouses in Mombasa for weeks, with losses estimated at about $8 million per week.
The Middle East takes an average of 20-25%, buys an average of 20-25% from this auction. And Pakistan, which also neighbors Iran, buys 40%. So we are talking about a market share of 65%. So should this war continue, then the impact, the negative consequences will be more severe to the tea trade and tea value chain players.
Tea shipments to key markets such as Pakistan and Egypt are still moving, but only via the longer route around the Cape of Good Hope, driving up freight and insurance costs and squeezing exporters' margins.
This tea subsector actually supports around millions of people in Kenya, actually small-scale farmers. And so if this war continues, we see so many people going hungry, children dropping out of school, and people skipping meals.
At village buying centres, farmers say reduced earnings are already affecting daily life. Many warn that delayed sales and lower returns are making it harder to cover basic needs.
I'm very worried, very worried. Some of us, we have got problems because we also rely them with the health. Because when we plug this tea, we take it to the market, we go to the hospital, we pay this with this cash we take from our tea.
Kenya exports an average of 100 million kilograms of tea annually to Middle East markets, leaving the sector highly exposed to prolonged disruption. The disruption comes as major carriers suspend routes through the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el Mandeb, forcing vessels to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope.
After the break, we turn to Armenia's delicate balancing act between Moscow and the West, as Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan meets Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow to discuss the future of their strategic alliance, economic cooperation, and regional connectivity in the South Caucasus. Stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabon. One important note to Fierce. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Shade of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv, Washington, London,
Moscow,
Kiev, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Emu.
Welcome back. You are watching Prime Time. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has met Russian President Vladimir Putin during work visit today in Moscow. The talks began in an expanded format with senior officials from both sides, focusing on bilateral ties, Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, wider regional issues, and the development of economic and transport links in the South Caucasus. According to the Kremlin, the discussions are set to continue in a more informal one-on-one setting over a working breakfast. Armenia is entering a politically sensitive moment as Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan meets Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow to discuss the future of the strategic alliance, economic cooperation and regional connectivity in the South Caucasus. The talks come at a time when Armenia is recalibrating its foreign policy, seeking closer ties with the European Union and the United States, while still remaining economically linked to Russia through the Eurasian Economic Union and security structures like the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Domestically, Armenia is heading toward critical parliamentary elections on June 7th, where the ruling Civil Contract Party faces strong opposition blocs, some of which maintain closer ties with Moscow and challenge Pashinyan's peace-oriented agenda with Azerbaijan. The outcome could significantly reshape Armenia's geopolitical trajectory. To analyze these developments, I'm joined by Dr. George Micedlishvili, Associate Professor at European University in Tbilisi, Georgia. Mr. Micedlishvili, good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Dr. Micedlishvili, how significant is the meeting between Pashinyan and Putin for the future of Armenia-Russian relations? And is Armenia moving away from Russia or trying to balance between Moscow and the West?
Okay, this is a very important question. Obviously, Putin wanted to meet and warn Pashinyan. So from that exchange, from the open exchange, of course, we couldn't be behind the closed door, but from the open exchange, Putin reminded the extent of economic dependency on Russia, the fact that the exports to the countries of the Eurasian Union increased manifold, that he reminded that certain Russian citizens are behind bars in Armenia, those who are very influential and those who would like to take part in the election. Putin also reminded Pashinyan about this extensive Armenian community in Russia. Some of them hold dual citizenship, therefore are eligible for elections. So Putin very much hoped there will be no impediment. Pretty much, so hinting, but not very finely, not very, I would say, kind of just diplomatically, so that he wants these people to participate. And it is known that they hold strongly pro-Russian views, and the current tilt of Armenia towards the West is not to Putin's liking. He also said, of course, it's the choice of Armenia, but be reminded that they are in extensive economic ties with the partners of the Eurasian Union. And so again, he reminded the price that Russia actually charges Armenia for natural gas, which is about 177 like those per 1,000 cubic meters, and also said in Europe they have to pay 600, so significantly more. Okay, pretty much underlining the benefits of working closer with Russia. Pretty obviously it is one. I would liken it to a certain extent, the visit of Pashinyan to Moscow to visit of Ser Sarkisyan, his predecessor, in 2013, after which Armenia closed ties, pretty much severed ties with the European Union, refused to move towards the signing of the association agreement, and joined Eurasian Economic Union. I don't think the result will be that obvious in this particular case, but so Putin's messages were absolutely clear. He sees what is happening in Armenia. He is not very much happy about that, and he looks at he also mentioned the election on several occasions. It is pretty clear that this visit, only 2 months prior to the election, is a strong political message. So, therefore, it looks like Putin sent the ball towards Pashinyan's side. Now, ball is on his side, and he has to act accordingly.
Dr. Michelishvili, how much leverage does Russia still hold over Armenia economically and politically?
The leverage is significant. It is not as overwhelming as it used to be few years ago, but still Eurasian Economic Union and the fact that these Russian, these Armenian railways, Armenian electricity grid, so very much dependent on Russia. Armenia made several moves in order to diversify its dependency and to lessen the share of Russia. It is less than it used to be a few years ago, but still remains significant, and obviously Russia does hold the leverage. If will be, so Putin will apply the pressure. Probably, so that was the nature of the talk behind the closed doors, because Putin usually doesn't mince words actually on the one-on-one conversation. He's been diplomatic in this in the public meetings, but he's known to be pretty harsh on this one-on-one basis. And well, we saw it in 2013. We saw it on a couple of other occasions with other leaders. And well, looks like now. So Putin staked much on this election in Armenia. He believes that this is the chance for Russia to, steer Armenia back to its fold. And well, it seems that this meeting will be important. In a few weeks, we will see the actual outcome of this meeting. Also, Putin mentioned this the current track, peaceful track between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Well, we know perfectly that Russia is extremely unhappy about that. Well, Putin abstained from the passing this judgment about that. But again, he mentioned that he's watching it, and therefore, well, he pretty much enumerated all the issues which he wants to change.
So what do you think? What impact could the June 7th parliamentary elections have on Armenia's foreign policy direction?
I think that this election will be a watershed event. So Russia staked much on making Pashinyan lose, or at least actually win in such a manner that he will not have a significant sway on the course of foreign policy. So again, he mentioned an influential Russian businessmen / politicians who are under behind bars in Armenia. So and significant Russian Armenian community in Russia, some of whom hold dual citizenship, therefore are eligible to vote. So it seems that Russia stakes a lot, and Russia considers that important. And obviously for Armenia, it seems that from the domestic discourse, so this is about the path of Armenia. So towards peace and leaving the conflict behind, or the victory of revanchists / pro-Russian forces who will want to to reinvigorate the conflict. And because we know that the Karabakh war, the conflict was the major leverage of Russia on both Armenia and Azerbaijan, so on South Caucasus in general. South Caucasus could not develop its potential to its full because of that conflict. Now that conflict seems to be behind, Russia understands it might lose the foothold forever. Particularly considering the fact that Russia is currently bogged down in Ukraine and doesn't have as much a leeway and latitude for action, and it cannot be as spoiler as it used to be actually a few years ago, and therefore, well, Russia declared actually its intention to have the situation changed, but again, it doesn't possess the leverage that it used to possess a few years ago.
Dr. Michelishvili, how strong is the opposition and why are they seen as more aligned with Russia?
Well, because part of the opposition is tied to the former prime ministers, Sarkisyan and Kocheryan. Now they run on different political platforms. So these are the people, particularly like Kocheryan, who pretty much sold out Armenia to Russia, who became extremely rich at the expense of selling out Armenia and important strategic assets. That was unfortunately this like so-called the Pyrrhic victory, the price that Armenia paid for this, in deep quotes, victory and occupation of Azerbaijani like territory. So many people considered it as a sacred victory, but actually like Pashinyan's leadership and the recent events show that it slowed down Armenia's development, it slowed down Armenia's modernization, and it slowed down realization of the South Caucasus potential as a region. So now, well, we see that this could become a history, and this peace track moves forward. That obviously Russia takes it as a threat of losing influence in the South Caucasus. That's why it takes a lot on the certain opposition forces. They even nominated one of the former prime ministers, Gerlenko, if I'm not mistaken, this is his last name, who has been dealing with that for the past few months.
Dr. George Michelishvili, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your invitation.
After the break, we'll get the latest from our correspondents in their regions.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has confirmed contacts with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, but denied that negotiations are underway. Our Turay Shiralilo has more from Tehran.
I am reporting from Enqilab Square in downtown Tehran, where preparations are carried out for funeral of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy Commander Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, killed in Israel-US attacks recently. The war is 5 weeks old, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that contacts are underway with the US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, but not in the form of talks. In an interview with Al Jazeera, he said Iran receives messages from Witkoff directly as before, but it does not mean that Tehran and Washington are in negotiations. He ruled out reports suggesting talks between US and Iran other than his ministry, and added, all messages are either conveyed through the foreign ministry or received by it. Iran's top diplomat also revealed that there are communications between security agencies of the warring parties without providing any details. As the war entered its 33rd day, Araghchi held phone contacts with Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov and his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan, discussing with them the latest developments. In the contacts with Bayramov, he urged all countries, especially those bordering the Caspian Sea, to adopt a clear and decisive stance regarding recent attacks on Iran's coastal areas of the Caspian Sea. And in the call with Fidan, he said Iran has not launched a missile at Turkey and warned about repeated false flag attacks. He said that Tehran is committed to observing the principle of good neighborliness and respecting Turkey's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. expressing Iran's readiness for joint technical investigation into the incident. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting from downtown Tehran for A News.
China and Pakistan have proposed a 5-point initiative calling for an immediate ceasefire and peace talks to de-escalate the Iran conflict. Following high-level talks in Beijing, both sides stressed that diplomacy is the only viable path and pledged to step up efforts to maintain regional stability.
China and Pakistan have jointly launched a 5-point initiative aimed at de-escalating the ongoing Iran conflict, calling for an immediate ceasefire and urgent peace talks. The proposal was announced following high-level talks in Beijing between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, as both countries step up diplomatic efforts to prevent further regional escalation. The plan's key elements include an immediate cessation of hostilities, the start of dialogue between all parties, and strict protection of civilians and non-military infrastructure. It also stresses respect for sovereignty and calls for maintaining stability in critical global shipping routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz, which is vital for energy supplies. Both Beijing and Islamabad emphasize that diplomacy is the only viable path forward, backing Pakistan's role as a potential mediator and even offering to host talks. The initiative shows growing efforts by the two countries to position themselves as stabilizing actors in the Middle East amid intensifying conflict. Manu Mukhtim, A News, Beijing.
Turkey has condemned a controversial new Israeli law expanding the use of the death penalty, warning that it would be applied almost exclusively to Palestinians. The legislation has drawn criticism from international actors and rights organizations. Our correspondent has more from Istanbul.
Turkey on Tuesday condemned a death penalty law approved this week by the Israeli Knesset, saying the law would apply almost exclusively to Palestinians. In a statement, the Turkish Foreign Ministry said the legislation was aimed at entrenching what it described as Israel's apartheid regime against Palestinians. The ministry said the legislation was a continuation of what it called Israel's policies of denial, annihilation, and political executions, and declared that the law was unlawful. Ankara also called on the international community, including the United Nations, to respond to what it described as racist and unlawful measures taken by Israel. The bill was approved by the Knesset on Tuesday, with 62 lawmakers voting in favor, 47 against, and 1 abstention. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voted in favor of the legislation. Following the vote, Israel's hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir called the move a historic day. Israeli officials say the law is intended to strengthen deterrence against what they describe as terrorism, particularly in response to attacks on Israeli civilians and security forces. The legal amendment expands the scope of capital punishment and allows for executions in certain cases with reduced procedural requirements. Along with Turkey, rights organizations and UN experts have warned that the new sentencing rules would likely apply almost exclusively to Palestinians. Ahead of the vote, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy all expressed their deep concern, saying the measure risked undermining Israel's stated commitment to democratic principles. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Georgia's parliament has approved changes to its election law, limiting who can take part in international monitoring missions. The move is expected to spark criticism from opposition groups and civil society. Our Nini Nikolaishvili has more from Tbilisi.
The Parliament of Georgia has approved changes to the Election Code of Georgia that will now restrict international election observer roles exclusively to foreign citizens. Under the amendments, Georgian citizens will no longer be allowed to register as international observers in election monitoring missions. The law also introduces formal procedures for registering interpreters accompanying foreign observers. The changes were presented by David Metikashvili of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. According to him, limiting observer roles to foreign nationals will help ensure more neutral and objective assessments, free from what he described as internal political influences. The amendments come amid a broader wave of legislative reforms introduced by the government following the 2024 elections. Authorities maintain that these steps are aimed at defending state sovereignty, strengthening constitutional order, and preventing political manipulation within key democratic processes. However, opposition groups and civil society organizations are expected to criticize the move, arguing it may reduce transparency and limit local involvement in election oversight. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Kazakhstan and China are stepping up efforts to strengthen one of the key transport corridors connecting Asia and Europe as shifting trade partners continue to reshape global logistics. During high-level talks in Beijing, the two countries agreed on new targets to significantly increase rail transit volumes and expand capacity along the route. Our correspondent in Almaty has the details.
By 2029, Kazakhstan and China plan to increase container transit along the Trans-Caspian route to 3,000 trains. The agreement was reached in Beijing during a meeting of the bilateral railway transport subcommittee. The sides reviewed the current state of rail freight and confirmed plans to expand transit along the Trans-Caspian international transport route, the corridor linking China through Kazakhstan with the Caucasus, Turkey and European markets. They also agreed to continue upgrading the ports of Aktau and Kuruk on the Caspian Sea to increase capacity. The corridor is already showing strong growth, with freight volumes reaching around 4.5 million tons per year. Container traffic is expanding most rapidly, driven by simplified customs procedures and improved conditions for international transport. According to transport officials, closer coordination between countries and operators along the route has played a key role in improving efficiency and overall performance. As a result, delivery times have been cut significantly. What once took between 28 and 32 days now takes between 13 and 17 days, making the route increasingly competitive for global carriers. Fariza Kalimurzen, Almaty, A News.
Central Eurasia space ambitions are in focus at the 2026 Space Technology Conference as Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Turkey present key updates on satellite programs, launch capabilities and human spacelift. Here is more.
At the Space Technology Conference in Tashkent, participating countries are outlining how they plan to expand their presence in the global space industry, with a strong focus on national capabilities and international cooperation. Azerbaijan, represented by Azercosmos, continues to position itself as a regional satellite operator. The country currently operates multiple telecommunications satellites, including Azaspace 1 and Azaspace 2, and hosted last year STC conference in Baku, reinforcing its role as a regional hub for space dialogue and commercial partnerships.
Well, at the time we also participating at the Space Technology Conference, and I think the conference itself is very saturated with the valuable content. As such, we view it as a platform to encourage regional and international cooperation, such as with member states, with the leading key industry players who are also interested to contribute to the ecosystem of the Central Asia. So in general, we've managed to meet several key industry players and agree on the future cooperation.
Kazakhstan remains central to global space infrastructure through the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the world's first and largest operational space launch facility. From Baikonur, numerous international missions are launched, including crewed flights to the International Space Station. At the same time, Kazakhstan is working to develop its own satellite capabilities and digital space technology through national programs. Turkey has made significant progress in recent years, particularly in human spaceflight. In 2024, Alper Gizerafchi became the country's first astronaut, completing a mission aboard the International Space Station. Through the Turkish Space Agency, Ankara is also advancing satellite production, lunar mission planning and expanding its domestic aerospace industry.
Well, you know, you are in a very rapidly developing region here in Central Asia, and being one of the leaders within the region, I think, gives you a very strategic advantage. The global space community is always looking for new markets, new actors, and I think Uzbekistan has positioned itself perfectly as one of key players in the region and an equal partner also for international cooperation.
Together, these developments highlight a broader regional shift, as Central Eurasian countries invest in space technologies not only for innovation, but also for economic growth, connectivity and scientific advancement. It is Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
On behalf of the A News team, thank you for being with us on Prime Time. Join us every weekday for the latest updates from around the world.